Hi there, and welcome to this edition of Supervisor Spotlight. My name is Angie Carpenter. I'm the Islip Town Supervisor, and we're here at Long Island MacArthur Airport in the studios of Long Island News Radio. A lot of activity happening here today at our wonderful airport, and I'm delighted that in the studio today our guest is a friend and a colleague on the Islip Town Board, and that's Councilman Steve Flotteron. Steve, thanks so much for making yourself available today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be able to talk about some things that are going on in town.
Okay, great. Well, no one knows better what's going on in the town than Steve, because he's really there, very engaged, very involved on a regular basis. But, I think it would be interesting for our listeners and our viewers to learn about how you got involved. You're an elected official. You're a government official, and sometimes people might refer to you as a politician if they're not being nice, but I tend to think of you as an elected official. And tell everyone how you got involved.
How I got involved, I moved into the Bayshore Brightwaters community about 21 years ago. I grew up in Nassau County in Lynbrook, and I got my first home and having children, and I just got civically involved because moved into a beautiful community, but they had some issues like all communities. And I figured instead of me complaining about it, or saying, "Oh, let's just move over a problem," let me learn about it, see if I could help. And I feel as you get older, it's my time to take responsibility. So I got active in the Bayshore Summit, went to the Bayshore Chamber meetings, and that's slowly how I got to meet you. You were the new legislator at the time, and I was through the summit and working on community groups to try to clean up some issues in the community.
So what year was it that you moved to Bayshore?
I moved to Bayshore in 95 and got civically active in 96.
Okay. So I was already a legislator for a couple of years, and I remember Steve coming to the office on a regular basis with all kinds of issues, code enforcement issues, multifamily housing issues, a list of properties that he actually took the time to check out. I can remember it vividly. And yes, Steve served as a member of the Summit Council, which was a consortium of all of the groups, both civic and fraternal organizations, and the school district kind of spearheaded it. That was when Evelyn Holman was a school superintendent. And you really got yourself involved in issues. It was as an elected official, so I was already there a couple of years, to see someone who cared that much about their community. And I know that you were not there caring and doing because you were saying to yourself, well, I'm going to do this because someday I'm going to be councilman. I am sure that at that point in time you had no idea. Clue.
No idea.
So how did that happen?
Well, I was teasing back is I know Angie after a while, sometimes she'd see me coming, she would groan a little bit because, I was always being tenacious about things, but I was really, out of all the electeds, I found your office being the most helpful. And being a businessman, I sell insurance for a living. I found, well, go where the best customer is or the best client, and I knew I could get things done through your office. And if I had to explain to people when Angie's not around, how I explain why I think she's great, and I never say that in front of your face, is that when I civically got active, one of the first things I did was concerned about some abandoned homes or problem properties in the community, and I got together a list, and I saw this list. It was like, wow, there's like a dozen homes in one neighborhood, and Suffolk County owned them. And as a person who never was first time being civically active, I didn't realize why would the county own them, and foreclosures. Mm-hmm. Again, I was in my mid-30s. I didn't understand how a lot of that worked. And I remember going to your office and complaining, why does the county have these properties? And you explained they were foreclosed properties and how they get that from owing back taxes. And I probably challenged you a little bit, ignorant of the topic, and maybe agitated you. It seemed like a month later, Angie invited me and the community to basically a press conference, and Angie worked out. It was when I asked her about these abandoned homes. The first thing was well, the county doesn't want these homes to begin with, and these homes are in bad shape. They need to be torn down, and we don't have money in the budget to just tear down homes.
I forgot all about that.
And I remember, and Angie, I always say this story. She's such a business person, thought out of the box. I brought her a complaint, what government usually takes many years to take care of things, was within weeks. She's having a press conference, and she went to a developer that was building the new Gardner Manor Mall.
Yes.
And she asked, could we borrow your bulldozers for a day and tear down 10 buildings, and got the town to to, I guess, waive the tipping fee. So Angie got 10 homes bulldozed down, not really using taxpayers' money, and got rid of drug problems and other illegal activities, and she did it within weeks. So yes, when she sees me, she's grown, because I said, wow, she's really successful. I'm just going to go to her office always to ask questions, because she always got it done.
Well, that was kind of interesting. And those houses, most of them were on substandard plots that could never be built again.
But to this day, that community is that much more stable.
Oh, absolutely.
That was really the first major project happening, getting rid of those homes where there was illegal activities happening.
Oh, it goes without saying. And that kind of problem exists in communities across the county, across the island, and quite frankly, across the state, because now those parcels have a new name, and they're called zombie homes. And they do attract illegal activity. They attract squatters, and the list goes on. But we are addressing zombie homes and that issue head on in the town. I know we had a tear down just the other day, but New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman has given grant money to municipalities across the state of New York. $13 million were distributed amongst municipalities, cities, counties, villages and towns across the state. Nassau County, we in Islip received $340,000, and that is targeted specifically for the issue of zombie homes. So
that's going to be a nice help.
Yeah, it is.
Congratulations on getting that.
Yeah, and each town board meeting, routinely, we have, almost a dozen more, sometimes less, of homes that we are voting on to board up and clean up or tear down. These are eyesores in the community that members of the community come to us and tell us, what the issues and the problems are.
It's one of the happy accomplishments of being on the board and working with you also is I remember about 5 years ago we had, I counted, I think it was in 2011, we only did 35 board ups for the whole year. Now we do that much almost every other month together. Like we have 10 times our amount of production with our town attorneys, with our code enforcement, getting the right tools to close down these homes. I know a lot of times people are frustrated that wish it was even more quicker, but there's some bureaucracy we have to get through. But the town of Islip is doing 10 times more of the production of taking care of these problem homes than they were 5 years ago. And again, it was great working with you and like trying to seek these opportunities like these grants or money to even get more done. Which stabilizes the whole street in the community. That's why it's so important.
Oh, it does. And it's not, and he said it stabilizes the neighborhood, it protects. It's a public safety issue too. It's an economic issue because it deteriorates property values. If you're next to a home that's a zombie property and you decide to sell your house, you can imagine how many real estate agents are going to go driving right by, and the person's going to be in the car. Oh, I have a nice house for you to look at, and they pull up and they see the house next door across the street, and they just keep right on going because there's no interest there.
Exactly, because you don't feel that big investment you're about to make. Is it safe with an issue like that next door?
Or is it, and then it becomes a public safety issue too. And we've had many instances, and I know one case in particular that was absolutely heart-wrenching, that there was a zombie property. Someone went in as a squatter, and they were engaging in illegal activity. There was drug, activity going on a regular basis, and the property owner, the wife was home alone at night. The husband worked nights. And she was really frightened. She was really frightened to be there, and he was concerned about her. And, eventually we were able to right the situation. But you don't stop to realize sometimes how much of a public safety hazard these kinds of properties are. But we are addressing them. We really, really are. And
some of those things we've spun into over the years is, again, with our community development agency and our housing authority is good ownership, first-time home buyers, or good management, or where even if it is someone who has a business, like has a rental house, good owners and manage the properties, but these abandoned properties aren't managed and taken care of.
Exactly. So we talked about this topic, and we have many, many more things to discuss. So stay with us as we take a little bit of a break, and we will be back for Supervisor Spotlight with Councilman Steve Flotteron. Thank you. Welcome back to Supervisor Spotlight. I'm Angie Carpenter here in the studio today with Councilman Steve Flotteron. Steve, I'm so happy you're here. Really, I really mean that.
I enjoy the opportunity.
Yeah, it's great. So we were talking about some of the issues you're confronting as a councilman, how Steve got involved in government. You've been there quite a number of years now.
I'd say I'm the old guy on the board now. I had brown hair when I started, and it's a little whiter. This is my 11th year. So I'm in my third term.
So with having been there 11 years, there have been some high and low points, I'm sure, in the town's history, and challenges, certainly. I know as an elected official, one of the biggest challenges for me is trying to get myself to 2 places, 3 places at once. There's always a demand on your time. People want you, to be at a ribbon cutting, to be at a meeting, to hear their concerns, and you want to make yourself available, and splitting yourself sometimes is difficult. And for you are known as someone who gets to as many things as you possibly can. So, and I think people really appreciate that about you. You are the ever-present council person, and
Thank you.
It is appreciated. And some of the other things we have to deal with, the business, side of the business. And, I'm the chief financial officer as a supervisor and present a budget. And we have the challenges of meeting our needs, having the revenues, and watching our expenditures. And we've done a very good job lately. But tell me about some of the history of how we got here.
Well, I got on the board, I started in 2006. Back then in 2006, the town was in really good financial shape.
Oh, we were.
There was a lot of reserves. The administration at that point, they saved a lot. Part of the reason they were able to save a lot, as you remember, the real estate market, one of the ways the town gets revenue besides taxes or fees is mortgage tax. And if you remember, the height of the real estate market was 2004, 5, 6. And the mortgage tax, which the town relies on, part of its base of getting revenue, we were getting it 4 times more than historically. I think in the older days, it was like $5 million a year you might get in mortgage tax 10 years ago. They got as much as, I think one year, they got $26 million in revenue.
It was a different time because I was in the treasurer's office at that time, and supervisors would routinely call me around this time of the year in the fall, and they'd go, "What's my mortgage tax going to be?" Because they were formulating their budgets for the coming year, and they wanted to know what they had to work with. And I know back 10 years ago, in doing some research myself, the town of Islip routinely got in the 20 million neighborhood.
Yes.
Now we're getting about 7. So you've got a deficit right there of funding.
So what ended up happening a bunch of years when I first got on the board, I said, again, the prior administration did a good job of not just spending it or using it. They kept the taxes down. Actually, historically, the town of Islip was going down almost like 1% a year for 20 years. I know from looking back at old tax bills, if you go back for about 25 years ago, the taxes went down for almost 20 years until more recently because we had to correct something, which is unheard of.
Let me interrupt, because there are people out there that are listening and watching and saying, well, I don't know what he's talking about, but my tax bill sure as heck hasn't gone down in 10 years.
The town line.
Okay,
look at the town line.
There you go. That is the detail.
Yeah, and no other town has done that or surrounding, because maybe you asked me before my background. Before getting into government, I sold insurance and investments. I have a stockbroker's license. So I'm a real numbers person. I know how to explain numbers. I know how to look into them, like yourself, because you were a business owner. And again, what the town did historically well is they had a lot of reserves. One thing they didn't do well is a lot of the properties that weren't taken care of well or reinvesting in the infrastructure. The town world, the politics changed in 2007, and the economy changed. The real estate bubble bursted, and I was been having fights for I had 5 years when I was the minority member on the board. It was just like they were burning through all the surplus, and they weren't doing corrective actions about cutting spending. And I was the lone voice, always arguing at meetings, and they kept on spending more money, and even though they got a lot less revenue in. And they would say, "Oh, we're lowering the tax by 0.5%." I'm not saying we need to raise the tax, but it was like, let's cut some spending. And so you can't have it both ways. And we came to in 2012 when again got to the point when the town politics changed, the town became all one party. We finally started riding the ship under Supervisor Croce. The town supervisor before was spending roughly like $20 million more than he was getting in. We went through every reserve, we were bust. So we had to deal with how are we going to come up with an extra $20 million, and this is 5 years ago. We did everybody knows a nice sized tax increase at that time, but people didn't look at. For 20 years they went down. So I'll use the number. I don't like saying it was a 28% tax increase 5 years ago, but it went down 1% every year almost for 20 years. So a person after 20 years, not that your taxes went up 28%, you were paying like 8% more than 20 years ago. No other municipality still had it that low.
And truly, to this day, the town portion of your total tax bill in the town of Islip is the lowest of any other town in Suffolk County.
Yes.
And that percentage is?
The surrounding,
drum roll?
oh, the surrounding towns I'm talking about, Babylon, Huntington, they were either 2 to 3 times higher. You had the same home and you were in Babylon, you're going to be paying about 2.5 times higher. So if somebody's paying $500 a year in Holbrook, they'll be paying about $1,200 a year if they were in like West Babylon or parts of the town.
And we're talking about the town portion.
The town portion.
Yeah.
So the town of Islip has done an amazing job at keeping the taxes low. And I know, and of course, we're all upset. Average homes, a lot of people are paying like $12,000 a year, but the town is the one that controls all the quality of life things, and we're on that that home with $12,000 in taxes. We might only be like $500 in that tax bill. Again, we control the quality of life. And again, all these other towns which were increasing 3, 4, 5% a year for 20 years, Islip went down, and we had an increase. We're still below the cost of living for the last 20 years. No other municipality, if it ends up being school, police, library district, or surrounding towns, have increased as little as we have in the last so many years. We've done half the amount. So it's been an amazing time. So going back to the original thing we were talking about is there's some parts of riding the ship was done. Other ways we made up for that big deficit of too much being spent by the prior administration. We sold some excess land, but there's no more land to sell anymore. And I want to say a little bit of, with the budget you put forward working this year, you made a lot of cuts because on our it's about a $135 million budget. You're only looking for $600,000 more in spending. You're doing like 0.2%, which is well below what the tax cap would require on, you would think. But we'll get more into that.
Yeah, that's a complicated issue. But the percentage of spending increase, we actually decreased spending when you look at it percentage-wise from the previous year. And some of the things Steve's been a really willing partner, as Councilman Cochran is, and we have a new council person and Councilman Mullen, and she really seems to get it. There are strategies that we had to employ. When I first got there, I had a team of financial experts come in, volunteers, to look at our operations, to tell me what we could be doing better, maybe what we were doing wrong as a town. One of the things that, hit you square between the eyes, we had no pre-authorization for overtime. So our overtime costs were really not what they should have been. So we immediately were able to institute that. Overtime doesn't happen unless there's pre-authorization, unless it's an emergency situation. And it's amazing how fewer emergencies seem to pop up when you've got to get that permission ahead of time.
Yes.
So that's made a big difference. And we've zero-based budgeting was put into place, expecting the commissioners to give us year-to-date where they are on a quarterly basis, and we're moving towards monthly. And those are some of the things we did. And if you stay tuned, we will be back after a small break, and we will let you know what those strategies did on a positive vein for the taxpayers in the town of Islip. So I ask you to stay tuned, come back, and we'll hear more from Councilman Steve Flotteron on Supervisor Spotlight. Thank you. Welcome back to Supervisor Spotlight. I'm Angie Carpenter here in the studios at Long Island MacArthur Airport with Councilman Steve Flotteron today, who, lucky for us, is very well versed in the financial world. And, you sometimes don't think about that when you're making a decision about electing someone to represent you on the town board. People never ask about your credentials, really.
Yeah.
And it is so important because we're running a business. We're running a $233 million a year business with hundreds and hundreds of employees, and you want to do it right. Now, I
actually, even going on that, when I meet young kids to say how they want to grow up to be an elected official, my saying is get a real job first, get a career, learn something, because we need more people that understand business and politics, not just people that come out of college to be a poli-sci major, just to be in politics. You have that real life experience. Again, like yourself, you owned a business. You know how to figure out the bottom line, and that's what we're running. We're running a $230 million budget.
Absolutely. And I always say that people that grew up in government, sometimes do the electorate a disservice because they are not grounded in reality. But I talked a little bit about earlier of bringing this financial team in and some of the strategies we employed from the very beginning as far as zero-based budgeting and, year to date, quarterly and monthly, looking at your expenditures, so you're not coming there in October and saying, oh my God, we're so overspent, now what do we do? And all of those things have really brought us to a place where Moody's earlier in the year upgraded our bond rating.
Yes.
Unlike previous years when some of the things that were done at the town led to a downgrade of the bond rating, we were upgraded to AAA by Moody's, which is the highest rating a municipality can garner. And what does that mean to the taxpayer? Well, it means that when you go out to borrow, to do infrastructure repairs and advance your capital program, you're getting a much more favorable rate. And just recently, we approved a refinancing of some old debt, $18 million worth of debt that we were paying anywhere from 3.5% to 5% interest on, whether, depending on the issuance, that we were able to refinance for 1.14%. That is a huge savings to the taxpayers.
And the biggest reason is because our bond rating went up. And as a stockbroker, just think about it. You have a lot of people don't understand this thing's called like junk bonds. We're not a junk bond. And I'm sorry to pick on some other levels of government, but say even the county, they're not doing some of the tough things we've had to decide recently, and that's why we have good bond rating. And because you have made the decisions to make sure there's a little money in reserves. Moody's likes to see that. Things are being well managed and looking on people we're hiring and everything else, the talent we're getting.
Oh, absolutely. And paying your bills and not going to your credit card. There are municipalities that are amortizing their mortgage payments, their pension payments. And we did not do that last year. There were years that was done. And when the rating agencies came in, that was one of the first things they asked me. Are you planning on, amortizing your pension payments? And I said, absolutely not. We're not doing that. But you've got to grow your revenues. And, that financial team that came in, they looked at everything. And I asked them to look at the salaries too. And we found across the board that the salaries that we were paying to our employees in the town of Islip were far lower than they were, especially in management positions, compared to other municipalities. And why is that important to the taxpayer?
What's really important is, like, for example, in our town planning department, we did a national search for 2 years. We couldn't get a planner to come here with the qualifications because we weren't paying enough. We were paying in 2015 less than we were paying in 2006, which is unheard of. 10 years later, the people were making less than the town of Islip. All surrounding towns, all levels of private business were paying a lot more. After negotiating, and some people are making exaggerations, but again, I'll even say the number. The commissioners in this town pay what used to be $103,000. These are people that have to have a license such as engineering or architecture, many years of experience. They have 100 and something employees under them. They have all this responsibility. And it was, how do you attract someone from the private practice or from another government to come here? And we had to increase it, and we finally got someone from Wisconsin that was willing to take the job, but only if we would go up 20,000 more. And excellent person doing an amazing job. But again, the rating company saw you finally got talent here, and that with having talent, there's a good planner that helps you build assessed values and get things built and stuff, which it was not happening as smoothly as it can with a real planner.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm glad you focused on the planning department, because I have had so many people talk about their positive experiences over the past year in the planning department, that they're able to get projects moved forward, that there's a sense of, we want to help you. You know, business is there to work with you, not be an obstacle to you, and too often that was the case. We've got the planning department now. The building department is open one evening a week, so that if you need to get your permit for a pool or a solar permit, or you're putting an extension on your house, you don't have to worry about trying to get time away from your work day. We are open one evening a week, and that really does make a difference, and it sort of tells the public we really are there to serve you. We really do care. And so, you know, we've come through a little bit of a contentious process with the budget this year in our hearing. Unfortunately, it was misinformation that was put out there, but I think people really understand now, you know, you've got to compensate people appropriately, and I'm not saying we're ever going to be paying the highest salaries, because we're not.
No, we're still one of the lowest.
And we are not, you know, raising taxes because we're going to give people big fat raises next year. That's not the case. Although that was something that was said out there, and I think we finally clarified that point. And, you know, there's another cost that you have if you don't compensate people properly, and they come, they train with you, they know your intricacies and how your town works, and then they leave. You've got to start from square one.
We have so many different departments where we're hiring employees, getting them trained, and in the long run, they're almost on waiting lists from other towns. But they figure, okay, I'll work in the town of Islip. We're spending thousands and thousands of dollars training them because of certain certifications, depending what position it is, and we lose them 2 years later. They wouldn't leave if we were paying them okay. And again, even our last person was the acting commissioner of the planning. Wonderful man, did a terrific job, but he was an engineer. He wasn't a planner. He left because he didn't want to leave. He says he could not afford to work here anymore. He had to move on for his family. And that's, you know, that really was the writing on the wall. And you could say that other departments, such as even the assessor's office, we lost half of our talent just in 1 year to another town.
Yeah.
They took years of us working with and training, and we keep on losing people, and that's bad business.
It is bad business. And, you know, and if you're practicing bad business practices, you're not going to have a good bond rating, and you are not really being fiduciarily responsible for the taxpayers. And that's what we're asked to do. You know, when you raise your hand and you take an oath to represent the people that have the confidence in you to say, I believe in you, I want you there making those decisions for me. You know, I can tell you from my perspective, decisions are not made based on, you know, a soundbite, or is this going to be a good story in Newsday or News 12, or, you know, can I talk about it on the radio? You know, we're making decisions, and sometimes they're hard decisions, based on what is right for the taxpayer.
Well, I also feel when you look at town law or something, the supervisor makes the budget, but the rest of the board doesn't just have to say yes or no.
Oh, absolutely not.
You can't just say no without improvements of how, because it's supposed to be a 5-person board helping to make the budget, helps making improvements, and that has to be that discussion, not just yelling out a sound bite. And we all have a job. If there's other ideas and creativity, most of the board, not saying all, has shared with you ideas where you made some cuts and changes.
Yep.
But as far as I'm concerned, no board member is allowed or has the right to vote no on a budget unless they give line by line exactly the ways we can improve it.
Well, right now we're looking at a budget that is going to increase taxes $48 a year on the average household, and it's really doing to fund our highway fund and to make sure we are in compliance and fiscally responsible.
And if I could say one last thing as
Absolutely.
we close.
We've got a few seconds left.
Oh, okay. I recommend everybody if you lived in your home at least 20 years, pull out your old tax bill and see what you're paying today compared to 20 years ago. We've hardly gone up in 20 years compared to all the other districts or levels of government that you see in that tax bill. So you'll see how good of a job we're still doing.
Well, if you have your records, please check them. If not, go online and see if you can get them from the tax receiver's office. Yes. Thank you so much for listening, for watching, and Steve Flotteron, thank you so much for your service and commitment to the residents of the town of Islip. Thank you.